Right. Welcome back to another episode of the Rise of Women's Football podcast. Today we have Joe Montemurro. How are we today?
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Joe, for those that don't know you, current Australian women's national team coach, former Arsenal, Juventus, Lyon. You're known really for tactical innovation, cultural leadership as well, advancing the women's game. I remember you arrived to Arsenal in, 2017? It was, I believe.
It's the one. Yep.
So
Yep.
a long time in European football. So we're gonna go over everything. You want to talk us through the origins of your involvement in football in general?
Well, it's a long way back, but first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's quite nice. Listening to a few of your other podcasts, they've been really interesting, and it's nice to be here. I don't do many, so this is one that I'm honoured and proud to be part of, which is really nice. I suppose, look, your football love starts as a kid. In probably a little bit different for me because I grew up in Australia, which football isn't the number one sport. So we have to find other sort of ways to quench our thirst, if you want to say that, because there's not much around. We don't have a lot of the football on television and so on that you get in Europe. But I had an uncle who was an avid football supporter, and he used to take me to games in a movie theatre. We used to get games from Italy that were on those big reels, and they were always about 3 or 4 weeks behind, or even months behind. And that's where the love of football came. And obviously being of Italian origin and a migrant background, you sort of are surrounded by it in different ways. But that's where the love of football came, and I had opportunities to play in Europe in the lower levels, and embarked on a journey in coaching very young in my age, when I was 29. So and the love grew from there, and it keeps developing, and I've had some amazing opportunities to be part of some successful organisations, some great brands, and I think the biggest and most important part of my coaching so far is that I've seen an amazing rise in the women's game, and are so privileged and proud to be part of it.
You started your coaching journey there in Australia before making the big jump to London. What was the beginnings of your coaching journey? Did you always have it clear what you wanted to establish as a coach, or was it a very big learning curve along the way?
I think if you're not willing to grow and learn in coaching, you never sort of stay in the game and develop a level in the game. I mean, I think learning and being humble enough to listen and being humble enough to develop is part of I think every coach that's had a successful journey. So I think you always develop and learn. I learned today certain things that I hadn't seen before, just visiting clubs. But it pretty much started really just going through the basics structures of youth football. I was in men's youth football, but one of the things that was really important to me was to be educated. So getting the badges were really fundamental. Even schooling, doing a degree in sports coaching and sports psychology was really important. So those sort of journeys sort of all worked hand in hand, because I think the most important thing that I learned from scratch was I was working with people and working with the ability to lead and affect people's lives. The football was the vehicle, I think, but I always take that idea that you're part of people's journeys, whether they're pro footballers, whether they're staff members, whether they're fans, and it's important that you come across with a level of integrity, a level of humility, and one that obviously allows special moments to help people grow. So I think that was probably always the most important part. Um, and then the biggest break, I think, was in Australia when I was given the opportunity to start a club from scratch at Melbourne City, part of the City Group. And we knew from day one that if we set standards in Australia of what we believed a high performance women's football team should look like, a normal sort of scenario, then we could have success for many years going forward. And the club has sustained a very high level of women's football in Australia.
Definitely. And then from then you had your big jump to Arsenal. I guess we can go for a bit more of a tactical focused question. You come from Italian background, obviously. You did your badges in Italy, if I'm correct. So you have a very Italian-based football. But your football isn't that Italian traditionally. Your football is very attack-minded, possession-based. Tell me a bit about how you would describe your tactical and your football vision.
Look, I think foundations, having solid foundations that are transferable on the pitch, are important principles that underpin the football I want to play. And yeah, you're right. Italian background, defensive mentality, defensive sort of scenario. But there's a lot of merit in educating defensive structures, because you at times have to defend and retain the ball. So I've probably used that to I suppose my growth, to say, okay, well, yeah, we defend, but it's important that when we defend, there's a purpose for it. There's a purpose to retain the ball and obviously have that idea to have solutions with the ball. So I think there's base principles that we underpin what we want to do with the ball. There's base principles what we want to do when we don't have the ball. But the most important thing is to create, I think, some solid structures where players have the fluidity and the creativity to be themselves. Because I think as coaches, we probably sometimes box players in certain areas. But it's important that we make them understand the importance of when there has to be, I suppose, the team sort of scenarios, but also when it's important that they can be creative and expressive. But part of that is a word that I use quite a lot, and that's selflessness. So even when we do have the ball, the importance of what's happening around in the moments that we do have the ball, and sometimes it might be a player on the opposite side that might be pulling a fullback away to create space for someone else to get into. So the whole collective understanding with the ball is also a really important collective understanding of how important it is when we have the ball, but you're not in the active scenario of actually having the ball. So what are you doing without that? But I think having those base principles and structures that allow the level of fluidity for players to find the solutions in their situations, I think is really the base of, I suppose, the proactive possession-based football that we love playing.
And how is that jump for you from going from Australia to Arsenal directly? You go from, starting basically a club from the ground up and being very involved in everything, to going to one of the biggest clubs in the world, very well established team in the women's football. How is it for you arriving and instilling yourself in the dressing room, more importantly with your coaching philosophy and as you were in a new culture and everything? How is that process for you?
Look, the City Group and working in the City Group did give me the great foundations and the great base to I suppose develop your ideas of football, but more importantly, transferring these ideas that are in your head on the pitch and making them work on the pitch. I think that's the real key, because we've all heard about philosophies, buzzwords, game models, so on and so on, but the question I keep asking is, yes, you have a belief in football, but how do you transfer that in everyday work? And I think Melbourne City gave me that security and that confidence to do that. I suppose the transfer of going to a big club like Arsenal with its history, being an Arsenal fan, also. So I was very starry-eyed, I suppose, from that perspective. The bigger questions was, obviously having the qualities to lead a big change room with some fantastic players, a big club representing an amazing brand. How I could transfer the football and the leadership, and I must admit, the focus on football, the focus on making sure that we were clear on that being the main focus, I think was the biggest sort of confidence builder that allowed us to be successful. It wasn't about who you were or what you'd done in the game. It was about what contribution can be made for the way we want to play, because the football was the centerpiece of everything we do. And that's not just with players, that's with staff. So the buy-in for the staff, or, okay, well, we can play this football and this is how we can do it, then made the medical staff understand how they would treat players. The S&C would work according to the methodology of play that we put in. So it just had a football focus. We stripped everything back and had a real clear football focus. And I think the beauty of Arsenal is that there's a responsibility to play exciting football, and that's where I think the match was important. My ideas of football, the proactive way of possession and forward-thinking way of playing football was sort of what Arsenal wanted. So and what Arsenal demands as a brand. So it worked. It worked well.
And from Arsenal, you went to Juventus. From Juventus, you went to Lyon. So basically the biggest clubs in each country, essentially. Juventus, were one of the first to really invest in women's football, and they've won, I don't know how many leagues it was in a row. Lyon as well. I think Lyon needs no introduction in the women's football worlds. Jumping from club and instilling yourself in it, how's that relationship for you with kind of you as a manager with players, but more importantly with the club directly? You're talking to, big clubs that are very well established in what they want to do and what they have done in women's football. How is it for you going into a new club and, making yourself known or present? I assume you do a presentation, with board directors or whoever it may be to ask for resources, to ask what you need. Can you talk us through what that's like?
It's really funny because I've never really had to, I interviewed for the jobs, but I never had to do massive presentations on my ideas and my philosophy because, as you said before, they seem to be quite strong. And a lot of clubs now are doing a lot of data analysis on coaching and what I suppose your strengths and weaknesses are, how you recruit, your staffing structures, how you put things together. So I think Arsenal and Melbourne City probably was solid enough for clubs to say, okay, well this is the Joe Montemurro way. This is what he brings, and this could suit our structures. And that was really it was really nice to know that because. As I said before, the base has always been football. It's always been about how we can improve the level of football and how we can play a definite style of football. And I think the great thing for me, especially leaving Arsenal, was to challenge myself within new cultures, new ways of thinking, different staffing mentalities, traditions, big brands. So it was an amazing privilege to have those challenges. So I suppose Juventus was big in Italy as a brand. It's a great brand worldwide, but it had never done anything in Europe. In the Champions League, it was wanting to grow, and that was the big I suppose project that we had to bring to Juventus, and we got it from 33rd, I think, in Europe to number 8 in Europe through the growth through the Champions League, and obviously still winning domestically. And that one was really interesting because to instill a mentality of football that needs a little bit more time, a possession-based brand of football, into a tradition of very pragmatic football, if you want to call it. I won't call it defensive. I'll call it pragmatic. was a great achievement, because I was changing a lot of mentality, and the mentality of players that had grown up in an idea of football, and the challenges that brought with it was incredible, even with coaching methodologies and ideas which were very, very new, they'd never seen. So that was a real achievement. I really enjoyed my time at Juventus. It was a great opportunity, and then Lyon. It was like a real wow. You sort of think, wow, Lyon. With all the amazing players that are there, and the interesting thing is, it was more based on how to lead a group of superstars. They basically had 25 superstars that had done everything, and I was coming there to bring in some different ideas. Obviously, they wanted to improve the football in terms of the way they had a methodology and a style and a way. But the leadership processes were really, 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 really good, and I really enjoyed working with amazing people that have done some amazing things in women's football, but also to represent the brand in a really important way. I think was an amazing experience, and it was very, very hard to leave.
And obviously you jumped to Europe since 2017 to now. A lot of things have changed in women's football, both domestically for each club, for each country, but also as a collective in Europe, in the Champions League overall. What do you think has been, a two-parted question, what do you think has been something that's developed the most, and what's something that you still think needs to be developed even more?
Look, I always go back to the football, and I think we now have enough knowledge and growth within the sport itself, that I think from a technical, tactical, even physical, even the base professional women's footballer has now become at a level which I think is absolutely amazing. So for me, the football, the raw product has just gone to a level which I think is really amazing, and I think I really, really do believe that there's the more we're learning about training methods, loads, scheduling, so on, we're actually going to make it even more exciting on the pitch. So the on-pitch stuff for me, and even the mentality of professionalism of the base player is now, I think, at a really, really high level. I suppose the other part of that coin, in terms of where do we want to see it grow, I think there's a lot of areas that we can always touch on, but I do believe that there's a lot of discussion happening now on clubs, whether they should be standalone, whether they should be because all clubs do it differently. Some clubs are quite happy being absorbed in within the men's team and are doing it quite well. Some clubs are quite happy to stand alone. Some clubs are still quite happy in having not full-time staff, but bringing in specialist staff. So is there one real way for high performance women's football? That has to always be questioned. But I do believe that we have to stop using terminology of we're sort of women's football, or a different sport, or women's something. I think that the game itself has a normality where clubs, we shouldn't be talking about, they don't have a physio, or they don't have a goalkeeper coach. It should be a normality for high performance athletes. High performance athletes should have this structure. It's a normal structure for any, I suppose, high performance sporting organisation. And I'm a little bit saddened that we're still discussing, things that should be a normality in high performance sport, because the athletes on the other coin, as I said before, are professional. They are a high level. They are playing good football. They are tactically smart. They are physically strong. And I just think we get bogged down in what we should be not even discussing, should be normalities. And that's why I use the example of what is the right organisation for a club. I think we have to believe that this is normal. I did it at Melbourne City. You know, I said we lost a lot of players because they didn't want to keep their job to become a pro athlete, and we said we are a pro club. You'll have this backing as a high performance athlete, and this will be consistent. And I think, you know, we just got to stop the terminology of we haven't got, we should have this, we don't have that. We should be talking about the normalities of what an organisation for high performance sport in the women's game should be, and that's normal processes.
I'll leave that with. I think that's a brilliant answer to leave the podcast at. I agree. You know, the minimum standard to get the women's game, both, you know, on the pitch and off the pitch, is crucial to the continuing development of everything. But we'll leave it at that, Joe. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. And, you know, I really appreciate the opportunity. And, I'll look into your next few podcasts with real interest.
Thank you.